People warn that the sharpest knives are the ones left on your family's table. They aren't wrong. I learned that the hard way in a home I believed would outlast every storm. Molding on the ceiling wood that remembers footsteps, windows that open onto a ribbon of green and water. Safety lived here until safety started knocking with brochures and forms. First came the questions dressed as kindness. Have you thought about downsizing? Do you feel steady on the stairs? Who helps with your bills? Then came the papers with tidy checkboxes that turn autonomy into a signature. Power of attorney, healthcare proxy. Guardianship, words that pretend to care while they quietly change the locks. A doctor suddenly concerned offering a wellness check that somehow ends with a competency evaluation. A realtor measuring walls with a smile that never reaches the eyes. A calendar filling with polite deadlines like frost spreading across glass. They call it protection. I call it erasure by paperwork. So I stopped answering the door with tea and started answering it with receipts, dates, recordings, and a plan. I let the story march toward a cheerful closing day where pens gleam champagne sweats in a silver bucket and everyone congratulates themselves for doing the right thing. 17 minutes. That is how long I watched them celebrate what they thought was the end of me. And then the door opened. Silence fell the way, a switch kills the light, the air changed, badges flashed. Some people lose their homes to storms. I almost lost mine to smiles. If you've ever felt your boundaries softened by gratitude, your dignity negotiated by relatives, your future managed by forms stay, watch how a signature meant to erase a life met a line it could not cross. Watch what happens when protection stops being a story other people tell about you and becomes a decision you make for yourself. Start here. Keep watching. I've lived most of my adult life inside the same four walls, and they remember me. The crown molding has heard my laughter. The floorboards know the rhythm of a night shift nurse coming home at dawn. I am Eleanor Nora to friends, and this apartment isn't just an address. It's a marriage, a son's first steps, the quiet after hard news. On Sundays, I wipe the window ledge and watch the trees change like a clock. Only New Yorkers understand. I used to believe a front door could keep trouble out. Then the trouble learned to smile. It wore polite questions and carried glossy brochures. One day I noticed I was straightening picture frames more often, as if order on the wall could hold back the unease collecting in the corners. That was the crack, not the wood, but my certainty. When safety starts to feel like a memory test, you know something has shifted, and it isn't the building. It started with small asks that sounded reasonable, even loving, just until payday. Camp is pricier this year. My son Jason, good job, good intentions. Or so I told myself, needed a bridge here and there. 10 minutes at the bank, a transfer, a sigh of relief. That's how it becomes routine, a kindness with a calendar reminder. I remember a cashier telling me, "You always take care of people," and I felt proud, like I was still nursing, still useful. But kindness has a twin named exhaustion. The asks grew and the explanations got shinier. I began writing amounts on sticky notes, tucking them in a kitchen drawer, promising I'd reconcile later. I never did. The climax arrived the day a little help required a spreadsheet and a deep breath. I stared at the totals and realized I couldn't recognize the line where giving turned into enabling. That line matters especially when the next ask is already knocking. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, has a talent for beauty silk that drapes just so candles that smell like hotels you whisper in. I don't dislike beauty. I dislike when it sends the bill to someone else. I learned new phrases: thread count, pre-order list, investment piece. Meanwhile, I counted groceries and co-pays, the ordinary math that keeps a life afloat. I noticed how special occasions multiplied and how celebration often required my checkbook. It's a strange feeling to gift joy and go home uneasy. I once held a pair of earrings. She loved turning them in my palm under bright store lights, and all I could see was interest on a credit card, not mine, but close enough. The climax came when a vacation deposit appeared before a debt was cleared. That's when I heard a quiet click inside me, like a lock. Love can admire good taste. It cannot bankroll a fantasy, especially when the fantasy eyes your front door. The brochures slid on to my coffee table, like visiting cousins, friendly, insistent, impossible to ignore. Right-sizing, they called it, as if a life were something you hem. I read phrases that made me feel both cared for and erased maintenance-free. Community meals safety monitoring. I'm not against any of that when it's chosen. Choice is the key. The talk shifted from someday to let's look from options to timelines. I tried to laugh it off. Who's carrying my boxes, but I felt my hands go cold. One afternoon, a glossy page showed a tidy studio with cheerful curtains, and I imagined my dining table where birthdays and reconciliations happened, vanishing into someone's storage unit. The climax landed in 6 soft words. This place is too big for you. A sentence like a measuring tape around my throat. Downsizing can be a decision. It can also be a strategy. And the difference is whether you're invited to sign or simply expected to. Concerns started arriving with muffins. We're just worried about stairs, rugs, passwords. Worry is powerful marketing. It sounds like love and negotiates like a lawyer. I know fall risks. I taught families how to move throw rugs and label pillboxes. But I also know the difference between practical help and a campaign. Suggestions turned into scripts. It's only a safety form. Everyone fills these out. The more I smiled, the more the lists grew. Emergency contacts, medication summaries, who handles finances if... I began to feel like a weather report. They were watching for storms. The climax came when a just-in-case binder landed on my dining table tabs, shining health proxy power of attorney guardianship. I touched the plastic and felt something precious slip. Not my memory, but my authority. Care is a hand on your back, steadying you up the stairs. Control is a hand on your pen when you didn't ask for it. There's a look people get when they're deciding what to keep. Thrift stores' estate sales, online listings. I've seen it. I just never expected it in my living room. Phones angled towards shelves for a family album, but the lens lingered on brand names frames, the china my mother loved. A drawer opened by accident, a photo for measurements. I laughed the first time. By the third, my stomach tightened. I tried a small test, rearranged a vase by 2 inches, moved a jewelry box to a different shelf. The camera found them again, like a dog on command. Climax a whisper from the hallway. This will go fast once papers are in place. That sentence didn't smell like nostalgia. The call came at dinner time when forks are loud and defenses are soft. We need 50, not 5, not 15. 50. The story was crowded, job restructuring, medical bills, academic programs all speaking at once. I asked questions the way nurses do, slowly, one at a time, letting silence do its work. The answers frayed, the tone changed. I was suddenly selfish living in the past, clinging to rooms I didn't need. I held the phone away and looked at my reflection in the dark window, a woman being told her life was an obstacle. The climax wasn't the number, it was the voice. Entitlement has a heat to it, a scorch that leaves a mark even after you hang up. I sent the money because sometimes you choose peace to learn the lesson. And the lesson was clear, this wasn't about a bill. It was about a plan, and my signature was the missing piece. After that call, I started narrating my day to myself, as if a future version of me might need an alibi. I paid the electric. I walked the hall. I ate lunch. It's what you do when you feel yourself becoming a resource instead of a person. I caught the phrase in my head, an ATM with a heartbeat, and it landed like a bad joke no one laughs at. I thought about other older women I know, good women who keep families afloat with quiet deposits and swallowed worries. We pass casseroles, we pass cash. The climax was small but loud. I reached for my purse and hesitated, really hesitated for the first time in years. My hand stayed still. That pause felt like a curtain, lifting, and behind it stood a fact I didn't want to meet. If I didn't draw a line, soon someone else would draw it for me, and they'd place it right across my front door. Anger wants applause. Clarity wants paper. I chose paper. I bought a notebook that lays flat and a pen that doesn't smear. Dates, amounts, who said what. I wrote with the calm of a person preparing a meal, not a fight. I recorded details you only catch when you stop performing. Who carried folders, who avoided eye contact, which words arrived on repeat, safety, confusion, best interest. At night, I'd walk through the rooms and say out loud, "This stays mine." The climax was quiet, a decision to stop arguing and start documenting. It changed my posture. I answered fewer questions and asked better ones. When you write things down, the fog lifts and the pattern shows. Patterns don't lie. They just make you choose, pretend you don't see them, or act. I closed the notebook on a page that ended with a simple sentence, "Call an attorney." The pen dot at the end felt like a lock clicking. I met attorney Priya Desai in a small office with warm lamps and files that looked well used. I told her I felt trapped. Between two bad doors sign papers I didn't trust or blow up my family. She smiled gently. "There's a third door," she said. "It's called protection. No lectures, no jargon, just clear steps. Know what you own, decide who guards it. Make documents that answer before anyone else can." She explained options in plain English and asked me what I wanted my life to look like on an ordinary Tuesday. That question felt like oxygen. The climax came when she slid a legal pad toward me and said, "You get to choose who has the pen." I'd spent months feeling like a problem to be solved. In 10 minutes, I felt like a person with a plan. We scheduled follow-ups. I left with homework, not fear, and the knowledge that my signature could still defend me. With Priya's guidance, I started building the kind of safety that doesn't need supervision. We mapped what-ifs like a storm track. What if I'm hospitalized? What if someone rushes a form in front of me? What if a sale happens without my eyes on it? For each a countermeasure, simple, legal, quiet. I'd thought justice was a showdown. She showed me it's often a checklist. The climax arrived when we talked about timing. "You don't need a fight," she said. "You need a lock they don't know exists." That line changed everything. I stopped rehearsing speeches and started rehearsing signatures mine, hers, not theirs. In the elevator, I pressed the lobby button and felt suddenly taller. It's a good kind of power, the kind that doesn't shout or gloat. It just holds. I went home, made tea, and wrote one sentence on a sticky note for the fridge. Secure first, then decide who deserves explanations. The next morning, I called Detective Marisol Vega, a private investigator with a voice like a level line. I told her I needed proof, not drama. She listened without interrupting, then asked for times dates and the lay of the rooms. "Let's let the house speak," she said. We walked through together, choosing quiet corners where truth could sit and wait. Small cameras, a recorder hidden where laughter usually lives. It felt strange, like setting out plates for guests who'd already shown they couldn't be trusted. The climax arrived during a dry run. She pressed play, and my own empty living room answered back, footsteps, whispers, a door easing shut. "You don't have to convince anyone," she said. "You just have to show them." I signed her retainer with steady hands. For the first time in months, I felt the building exhale. Not relief, exactly readiness. The stage was set not for revenge, but for the truth to stand up. Detective Marisol Vega and I walked the apartment like two women setting a table. Except we were laying out silence. We chose corners that never draw attention, the bookshelf shadow, the top of the china cabinet, the hallway frame where sunlight fades by noon. Tiny cameras, a discreet recorder, wires flattened under rugs, the way I used to smooth a hospital sheet. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of tools that notice what people think no one sees. I brewed coffee to steady my hands and practiced acting natural. Leave the lamp on, don't glance up, don't flinch when whispers sound like thunder. Older friends tell me they forget where they left their keys. I told myself to remember where I left the truth. The climax came during a test. We pressed play and heard our own footsteps, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock. Proof the house could talk when it mattered. Now all it needed was company. I set a roast the way my mother taught me, low, slow, patient, and laid out the good plates. If you've ever cooked for people who make you uneasy, you know the measuring isn't in teaspoons, it's in glances. They arrived with compliments and a bottle that cost more than the groceries. I listened as I served the way nurses listen for the word that doesn't fit the laugh that sits wrong. Phones drifted over shelves for memories. I passed bread refilled water, kept the rhythm of a normal dinner while the house did its quiet work. There's a particular ache that comes when clinking silverware covers the scraping sound of being weighed and sorted. The climax came when a phone camera paused over my dining table, the one that holds birthdays and reconciliations as if taking measurements. I smiled at dessert, but my spine went cold. Supper can be a blessing. It can also be an audit with candles. I love photographs. They rescue Tuesdays from disappearing. But these memories had a different posture. The lens lingered on labels' corners condition. A frame was tilted, then straightened. A drawer accidentally opened. A hand held something to the light and set it down a few inches left of home. I tried a test, moved a small vase, switched a pendant to another box. The camera found them again, dutiful as a dog. I heard, "This is just for the family book," but the angle said, "What's it worth?" Older friends will recognize the feeling when help starts to look like assessment. The climax arrived with the softest sentence spoken to no one in particular. Good to know what we're working with, not what she loves, not what we'll keep safe, what we're working with. My room suddenly felt like a table at a consignment shop. I cleared the dessert plates and locked the jewelry box. The questions turned clinical overnight. Are you sleeping through any trouble with the stairs? Do you take your meds from a daily organizer? Practical, yes, and oddly scripted. I've done fall risk assessments. I've given families the same advice. The difference here was the pen hovering, not the hand helping. I found my pill bottles grouped for a photo. I didn't take my calendar opened to a doctor's appointment I hadn't made. Just tracking, they said. I said nothing and tightened my smile. Older adults know the drill. We appreciate safety rails and honest check-ins. We resist being reduced to a checklist. The climax came when I caught a whisper document. Patterns followed by a tiny nod. Patterns of what forgetfulness, frailty, or resistance to someone else's timeline. I boiled water for tea, counted 10 deep breaths, and reminded myself the body I'm in still climbs stairs, still signs its name. Still knows the difference between care and a case file. You never forget the first time guardianship floats through your home like a draft. It was said softly like a prayer or a threat, maybe both. If she's confused, if she resists best interest. The phrases layered themselves across my rugs like plastic runners. Another word arrived, capacity. Not kindness capacity. Not is she okay, but can she consent? If you're over 60, you know these conversations exist for real needs. You also know they can be sharpened into tools. The climax wasn't the word itself, it was the plan attached to it. Doctors, signatures, a timeline I hadn't approved, all pointing toward a new address I hadn't chosen. I rinsed dishes under a patient faucet and memorized the cadence. Later in the quiet, I whispered it back. Guardianship capacity best interest until anger cooled into vocabulary. You can fight a person and lose the room, or you can fight the language and make the room fight with you. The call arrived with bedside manners and a list. We're offering wellness checks to seniors in your building. I asked who requested it. The answer fogged the glass. Dr. Conrad Bell sounded practiced the way you sound when you've said the same line 100 times. Quick visit, nothing invasive, just to ensure safety. When I declined, the tone shifted, not rude, just firmer. Avoidance can be a sign of impaired judgment. That sentence sat on my table like a stranger's briefcase. Older adults know this pivot. How neutral turns nudging, then nudging turns naming your hesitation a symptom. The climax came when an appointment appeared on a calendar I hadn't touched, right before a date circled for paperwork. I thanked him, said I'd consult my attorney, and the silence on the line told me I'd used the right word. After we hung up, I wrote down the time, the phrasing, and the feeling a knock wearing a stethoscope. Forms breed in stacks: healthcare proxy, power of attorney, emergency contact. Each page sounded reasonable alone. Together they hummed like a machine. My dining table, the place where we passed rolls and forgiveness, became a desktop pens-aligned sticky flags marking where to sign. It's just in case, they said. Everyone does it. Everyone doesn't sign when trust feels thin as tissue. I read every line slowly, lips moving, like I was tasting soup. The room waited for the pen to touch down. If you've ever felt your name being asked to carry what your heart won't you know, the pull. The climax came when a new form slid across with a practiced flick guardianship petition guidelines. Not today. I stacked the papers neatly, set a coaster on top, like a lid, and said I'd have my attorney review. Smiles tightened. I cleared the table. Supper would be supper again, at least tonight. I didn't argue. I rescheduled. Let me find my glasses. I want to read this in better light. I'll sleep on it. In hospitals, we call this therapeutic delay, the pause that protects the patient from pressure. At home, I called it survival. I promised nothing and refused nothing. Small tactics help keep pens out of reach. Ask for copies. Offer tea. Each gentle stall grew a little fence around my name. Older friends tell me they practice the same skill with salespeople and charities, compassion plus a calendar. The climax arrived when impatience cracked the varnish. You already agreed. Don't be difficult. The mask slipped and I saw exactly what the rush was trying to outrun my right to think. I smiled, apologized for being slow, and added a new line to the notebook. Delay is not denial. It's dignity. The pace eased. On their faces, frustration. In my chest space, Detective Vega keeps a tidy mind. She printed emails, clipped timelines, and mounted a calendar where threads could cross. We don't need every crumb, she said. We need the pattern. Listening back to the house was like hearing a choir. I hadn't realized I'd assembled the same phrases, repeating the same nudges on different days, the same camera angle hunting value. She mapped calls from the doctor visits, from the realtor, the sudden interest in my building's transfer rules. The climax came when she circled a week in red medical evaluation signatures and a proposed move-in date for someplace I'd never chosen. They've turned your life into a project plan, she said, tapping the board. We'll turn it into evidence. I felt both pierced and protected. Older women know this twin sensation: grief for what you see, gratitude for the person who helps you see it clearly. We poured tea. The kettle clicked like a stamp on an envelope. Tanya Brooks from the management office called about a helpful inquiry from a relative, hypotheticals, about estate transfers, family sales, board approvals. Hypotheticals don't usually come with bullet points. I asked Tanya to forward the email. She did with a sigh that said she's seen too much. Buildings remember the families that try to outsmart them. I thanked her for the heads up and felt the floor steady a little, as if the apartment itself had braced its feet. The climax came when I read a line about expediting in the event of diminished capacity. There it was again, the polite shortcut that requires your absence to function. I sent the message to Vega and to Attorney Desai. Paper can threaten, paper can also defend. Older adults know the comfort of a file folder with our name on it for the right reasons. I labeled one management and slid the printout inside spine against spine with my lease. A cheerful resource packet appeared: assisted living communities, with glossy photos of puzzles and patio gardens. I'm not against any of it when it's wanted. What chilled me wasn't the list, it was the map. Every pin was far a train ride no granddaughter would take after school. Distance can feel like safety for the people doing the moving, not the person being moved. They used words like community support activities. I heard isolation control, fewer witnesses. The climax came when I compared dates. The medical evaluation landed 2 days before the recommended move-in. Tight choreography, the kind you use when you don't want the dancer to think. I closed the packet and wrote a note in the margin: Weiss's care, distance is strategy. Then I placed the folder next to my teacup, a small act of defiance. The ordinary, touching the official, my life refusing to be reduced to a brochure. By then, I knew two things: they needed my signature, and they needed my surprise, so I offered them neither. I said yes to tours, yes to quick calls, yes to just in case, and tucked each yes into a file labeled proof. I kept cooking, kept walking the hallway, kept feeding the birds on the sill rituals that steady the hands while the mind sharpens. Detective Vega adjusted a camera angle. Attorney Desai adjusted a paragraph. Older friends call this phase playing along, but that makes it sound small. It isn't. It's consenting to the performance while writing your own ending off stage. The climax was a private one. I looked at my reflection in the window at dusk and nodded, not rage, permission granted to myself to finish what I started. Let them feel safe, I whispered. Then let the truth knock. And somewhere in the apartment, a tiny red light kept its promise to stay on. Attorney Priya Desai slid the documents across her desk like a calm tide. Read this one twice, she said, tapping the irrevocable trust. I did, slowly. The words were simple, the effect enormous. My home would no longer be a loose thread someone could tug. It would be an asset guarded by a trustee. Priya answering to my instructions, not anyone else's urgency. Older friends tell me they sleep better when a will is done. This felt stronger, like installing a safe, not just labeling drawers. I initialed each page, hands steady, surprised by the relief in my shoulders. The climax came when the final signature settled, and Priya dated it a thud you could almost hear. If anyone waved papers at me now, they'd be waving at a locked door. I walked out into afternoon light, feeling 5 inches taller. Protection, it turns out, can be silent. It doesn't boast. It just makes every bad plan suddenly mercifully impossible. Detective Marisol Vega introduced me to Ethan Rowe, a quiet man who once chased corporate ghosts for a living. We'll need something that passes a squint test, he said. East River Asset Partners. LLC was born in the space of a week, not as a lie, but as a mirror. Real filings, a tax ID, a modest web presence enough so anyone looking would stop at. Seems legit. Older adults know this instinct. Set the table properly, even for guests you don't trust. Ethan handled the details. Vega handled the timing. I handled the courage it takes to play along with something that looks like danger. The climax came when Ethan forwarded the state confirmation, accepted, active, searchable. We had a buyer that could stand in daylight while still being ours after dark. I brewed tea I didn't drink and watched steam curl into nothing. The plan wasn't a castle. It was scaffolding strong enough to hold until truth arrived. We needed a face for the shell, polite, credible, forgettable in a crowd. Enter Miles Keaton, an actor with corporate shoulders, and a voice that makes a notary stamp feel glamorous. Your name is Brandon Hale Vega. Briefed him. You buy properties fast for short-term rental conversions. You like efficiency. You hate delays. We rehearsed in my living room with empty folders and a dry pen. Miles practiced the smile that reassures anxious agents, warm, brief, slightly bored. Older viewers will recognize the type. He's the man you'd let into a conference room without second thought. The climax came when he nailed a line I'd heard sincere men use for years. Let's respect everyone's time. It was perfect because it meant nothing and everything pressure without a threat. He shook my hand on the way out. I'll make this clean, he said. I believed him. Sometimes justice needs a performance. Sometimes a performance is how truth gets the mic. A plan fails when a door opens to a blank wall. Ethan wouldn't let that happen. He rented a small office in Midtown, clean carpet. One window, a framed stock photo of a skyline. A receptionist from a temp agency learned to say, East River Asset Partners, how may I direct your call? We stocked a shelf with binders labeled Acquisitions, Compliance, Closings, real leases in the printer tray, a calendar pinned with fake deadlines that matched our real ones. I sat in the lobby for 5 minutes, anonymous as a plant, and listened to the phone ring twice, then stop. It sounded like credibility. Older adults know the comfort of things that click doors, pens, heels on tile. The climax arrived when the building sent our mailbox key, a small brass rectangle that made me smile. The stage was dressed. If anyone came looking, they'd find paper people and a weekday rhythm. They'd also find a trap they could not see. Trevor Lang came recommended by people who pronounce commission like a love song. He had hustle, a tailored jacket, and the kind of optimism that makes you sign things. He specialized in delicate transitions and said it like a toast. I let him talk about comps timing buyer pools, while the part of me that did night shifts counted beats between his promises. Older friends will know this dance charm that arrives before character. Vega had already read his file complaints, near misses nothing that stuck. He'll follow the money, she said. Perfect. The climax came when Trevor pitched a fast path. We list quietly, we entertain one strong buyer, we close before anyone blinks. His eyes shone like he'd discovered gravity. I nodded like he'd invented it. Ambition is a loud engine. You don't have to rev it. You just point it toward a cliff and step aside. Trevor shook hands with Brandon Hale a week later, humming with triumph. We met in Trevor's glass-walled conference room, good coffee, bad art. Miles Brandon opened with exactly the right sentence. We're prepared to pay cash for speed. Cash does to timelines what storms do to calendars. Everything moves. Trevor laughed. He can't help it when he smells a bonus. I nodded, asking 3 sensible questions, each one designed to sound like trust being built. In truth, trust had been built elsewhere on Priya's desk on Vega's wall. Older adults know the seduction of the simple solution. We also know the invoice comes later. The climax came when Trevor floated a number that outpaced reality, then blinked when Brandon didn't flinch. We can make that work. Miles said boredom like a seal of approval. A closing window appeared on the whiteboard, 30 days. Pens clicked, calendars breathed. I agreed to preliminary steps while keeping my signature exactly where it belonged, attached to nothing that could move without me. Jason began texting timelines like a project manager on a countdown. Let's lock dates, don't overthink. We're finally doing the right thing. I recognized the rhythm hurry dressed as virtue. I suggested we pause to read. He replied with anecdotes about seniors who waited too long and suffered. Older viewers will see the tactic turn caution into selfishness, deliberation into danger. I answered with small courtesies. Thanks for caring, I'll sleep on it, and logged each message in my notebook. The climax surfaced when his tone sharpened. You agreed already. There it was, the myth of consent created by repetition. I stood at the window until my pulse slowed. My agreement lived on documents I trusted, not on someone else's impatience. We'll keep our appointments. I texted back neutral as a receipts drawer. He sent a thumbs up I could feel from across the river. Hurry is a tell. It means the truth cannot survive the wait. Vanessa arrived with pastel sticky notes like confetti. Let's be practical, she said, and I admired how her voice could make sorting feel like a spa day. Keep donate sell in neat handwriting across my history. She moved gently, almost lovingly, and for a second I wanted to believe this was teamwork. Then the categories started landing on things that weren't hers. To name my dining table, the quilt my mother stitched the china that only comes out when forgiveness does. Older women know the ache of being helped out of our own choices. The climax came when a yellow square perched on my grandmother's locket, the one that knows the shape of my collarbone. It'll be safer with the girls, she said. I smiled and peeled the note off, placing it face down in my palm. This one stays where it's always stayed, I answered. Her smile thinned, but she didn't argue. The house felt me draw a line. The inspector carried a flashlight like a wand blessing baseboards and outlets. The appraiser spoke in feet and comps polite as a librarian. On paper, this was ordinary. In spirit, it was theater. I brewed coffee, offered water, answered questions about boiler ages and board rules. Everything they touched was real. Everything they recorded would stand up in a file, and that's exactly what I wanted. Older adults know the power of not obstructing, let the process proceed, and show itself. The climax arrived when the appraiser complimented the excellent condition for age, and Trevor grinned as if he'd raised the building himself. I caught my reflection in a mirrored hutch, calm eyes, a mouth set like a seam. Let them collect measurements. The measurements were walking them toward a door they didn't know was locked. I stacked the inspection notes on the counter with a coaster on top. A private joke, we serve paperwork here too. Trevor loves ceremony. He laid out pens like silverware and popped a bottle that misted the room in celebration. Brandon signed with elegant boredom. I asked 3 confused questions that let everyone reassure me we were doing the right thing. Reassurance is a narcotic for people who want your consent. Older viewers will recognize the choreography smile's initials, a photograph for the file. My name landed where it needed to and nowhere it shouldn't. The climax came when the room erupted in soft applause. The click of caps, the clink of glass, the photo that caught me mid-smile. 17 minutes. That's how long they believed the future had been captured. I took a small sip and tasted nothing. Celebration has a flavor when it belongs to you. This didn't. As we left, Trevor squeezed my shoulder. Almost home, he said. I thought almost just not the home you think we're walking into. We set the closing for 3 weeks at a pocket of time that looks harmless until you fill it. On the calendar, I wrote only appointments, but in my head, I wrote growth interest assumptions, mistakes. Vega called it the bloom period. Checks would be written on tomorrow's money. Plans would harden into actions. Older adults know the pressure that time applies to wishful thinking. Meanwhile, I did ordinary things loudly, took a walk, baked muffins, called a friend, so the house would sound like home, not a staging area. The climax arrived with a simple email. Looking forward to a smooth closing. I replied, me too, and felt the words split in 2. What they meant to them, what they meant to me. 3 weeks is long enough to reveal who people are when they think the ending is already written. It was also long enough for my ending to sharpen its edges. Quietly, efficiently, on schedule, I called Gabe Ortiz at the moving company, a man who's seen more family stories than a photo album. Nothing leaves this apartment without written authorization from my attorney, I said. He didn't ask for details. He just repeated the sentence back word for word and added, we'll document everything. Older adults know the relief of a vendor who respects a boundary. I forwarded him dates, warning signs to watch for the names of who might call. He thanked me like a person who understands trouble before it arrives. The climax came when he emailed a confirmation outlining procedures like a security plan inventory photos. Signatures, no exceptions. I printed it and slid it into a folder labeled Movers, then placed that folder on the table where dinners used to fix everything. Not this time. This time the table defended me. If anyone tried to box my life early, they'd be packing evidence with every plate. Dr. Conrad Bell's office left a voicemail-friendly final, a slot 2 days before closing to ensure decision-making capacity. It was so neat, I nearly admired it. I replayed the message and heard the subtext, once the ink dries, objections die. Older adults know that just a quick check can be a lever if you let it near the hinge. I called back and confirmed sweet as honey and immediately emailed Vega and Priya with the time. The climax was planning my own presence like a witness. I would be rested, documented, accompanied, and very clear. In my notebook, I wrote a sentence that steadied me. Confident people aren't loud. They're prepared. Then I made tea and pictured the office where I'd sit the questions, I'd answer the way, I'd say no without raising my voice. Capacity isn't a mood, it's a fact, and facts hold up well when you've been treating them like glass instead of gossip. On Priya Desai's conference table, we lined up the aftermath like a parade criminal, complaints, civil filings, notices, to boards and banks, a cover letter for every door that would need knocking. These stay quiet until the moment they don't. Priya said, stacking them in a red folder. Vega added transcripts, timestamps, still frames from the camera that never blinked. Older women will understand the satisfaction of a drawer that finally closes without sticking. The climax came when Priya slid the red folder into a locked briefcase and clicked it shut. There's a sound to readiness. It isn't loud, but it's decisive. We agreed on signals, on who would speak first, on what words would end a conversation. I walked home carrying nothing but my keys and the knowledge that the next signature in this story wouldn't be mine. Some endings are messy. This one would be documented. Justice filed under open, ready to serve. Jason called sounding noble he'd stepped back from work to be there for Mom. Older adults know that music care has a melody urgency as the drum. He sent me a photo of a cardboard box with desk things and a caption about priorities. I congratulated him and wrote the date in my notebook. Resignations can be compassion. They can also be collateral for a bigger bet. Within hours, he forwarded new timelines and to-dos, as if quitting unlocked authority. I listened, said thank you, and pictured dice tumbling across a green felt table. The climax arrived when he announced, almost cheerful, "Now we can move fast." That was the tell. Care slows down to listen. A scheme speeds up to land. I stood at the window until my pulse matched the city's. If this was his grand gesture, it wouldn't be my leash. I texted back, "Let's keep everything by the book," and meant every quiet syllable. Vanessa texted mood boards and congratulations to herself. A larger house, a car that starts with a push button, a summer trip with white sand promises. We put down small deposits, she said, small like thunder, far away. She attached photos of keys that didn't exist yet, and a view from a porch that didn't belong to us. Older women recognize the choreography, spend the future to trap the present. I replied with emojis and silence, then printed every receipt she proudly forwarded. The climax came when she wrote, "Once the closing hits, we'll clear everything." That sentence sat in my kitchen like a stranger at my table. I stirred soup and thought of interest rates, school calendars, and how quickly a dream becomes a liability. Hope is beautiful. Leverage is hungry. I filed her messages under money promises, made a folder that gets heavy before it gets honest. 3 weeks had never felt so loud. I baked brownies the way my granddaughters like, edges crisp, center soft, and slid a note under the pan. For after debate practice, Emma texted a row of hearts. Chloe sent a gif of victory arms. I looked at those messages and understood my job: protect the future they'll grow into, even if it means upsetting the past they come from. Older adults carry this double-weight love for children and a duty to the children they've raised. The girls chattered about college visits and prom dresses. I hid the ache I felt, the kind that says this could be taken from them. The climax came when I imagined their faces the day Grandma moved away for her own good. I couldn't allow that story to stick. Setting boundaries wasn't defiance, it was an inheritance of safety, of truth, of a front door that still had a welcome behind it. I plated the brownies and chose courage. The recorder caught it, late, almost shy. Kids forget quickly. 4 words, room temperature, cold. I played them back with the volume low and the lights on the way. You listen for a storm that hasn't arrived yet. Older viewers know this sting when someone treats relationships like elastic. Forget. The hands that braid hair, the couch forts, the extra movie night when algebra won't behave. I paused the audio and stared at my reflection in the dark window, a woman whose role was being edited without her consent. The climax wasn't anger, it was precision. I labeled the clip, time-stamped it, and sent it to Vega with a short note. This matters, because it does. That sentence wasn't logistics, it was a worldview. If love can be erased by convenience, then nothing is safe. Not childhood, not memory, not a grandmother's promise. I pressed stop, closed the laptop, and let the apartment hold me steady. We met at my dining table, papers, fanned, pens ready. Just sign here so we can help. Jason urged, gentler than a shove, firmer than a hug. I narrowed my eyes like I needed better light and asked to reread a paragraph I already knew by heart. Older adults have perfected this, the protective pause. Vanessa pointed at colored tabs. I asked for water. Time stretched in my favor. The climax arrived on cue. You already agreed. I let my face cloud, then brighten. Oh, of course, I forgot. The pen touched the line of a document Priya and I had already made irrelevant. Their shoulders softened, and so did my smile. They thought they'd captured consent. All they'd captured was a performance. Confusion can be a mask when clarity needs cover. I stacked the papers neatly, mentally stamping them. Prop not power, the table stood between us, like a witness that knows exactly what it saw. What they didn't know could have filled a law library. The trust was already in place, iron underneath velvet, so any authority they waved at me had the strength of tissue. I brewed tea while they texted each other congratulations in the hallway. Older women understand the art of the undisclosed, not deceit protection. Some truths ripen in quiet, until they're ready to withstand a storm. The climax came when I opened my notebook and wrote a single line across a clean page. Their paper does nothing. It felt like clicking a deadbolt. I slept that night with windows cracked for spring air, not fear. Let them clutch forms, let them rehearse signatures. A locked door doesn't brag. It simply refuses to open. And in the morning, the apartment looked exactly the same. Like a loyal friend who keeps your secrets and your view trees tossing in the park light, pooling on the floor day after reliable day. Detective Vega spread our case across her board in 3 quiet colors. Green for transactions, deposits, commitments, the spending of a future that wasn't theirs. Blue for documents, emails, drafts. Versions of forms that kept circling back. Red for words, recorded phrases that revealed intention without a raised voice. Older adults appreciate order. Order gives fear a chair to sit in. We traced arrows from a wellness check to a guardianship petition, from a vacation deposit to a move-in date I'd never agreed to. The climax came when all 3 colors converged on a single week, a net tightening with calendar precision. "This is where they think you disappear," Vega said softly. I nodded. "This is where I appear." The board didn't shout. It hummed with inevitability. Money paper voice, the braid that holds when one strand alone might break. We took a picture of the board and then took a breath. The plan was singing. I met Gabe Ortiz in the lobby, a man whose handshake says, "I write everything down." He'd prepared forms that treated my furniture like witnesses' inventory sheets, time-stamped photos, signatures for every box. No authorization, no movement. He repeated a sentence that felt like a railing on a stairwell. Older adults know how rare it is to find a vendor who understands boundaries without bruising feelings. We synced dates and agreed on signals. If anyone tried to accelerate, he'd slow the truck to a stop and call me and my attorney on speaker. The climax arrived in his email summary, professional, thorough, impossible to misread. I printed it and placed it under the closings folder, then smiled at the symmetry, the same table that once hosted report cards, and Thanksgiving now guarded serial numbers and chain of custody. If someone tried to empty my life into cardboard early, they'd find themselves packing evidence by the pound. News travels in whispers before it makes a sound. Vega called a complaint had reached the state board about Dr. Conrad Bell, and it wasn't the only one. Patterns again, billing codes that didn't fit evaluations. Too fast to be real. Older viewers will understand the relief mixed with sadness when a mask slips. It means you are not imagining the wrongness. The climax came when Vega said, "They're reviewing his recent cases," and I pictured the neat stack of lives reduced to checkboxes. I poured coffee I didn't need and stared at the steam. If a physician treats consent like paperwork, he's not measuring health, he's measuring access. 2 days before closing his office, still confirmed my capacity check. Good, let it proceed. Truth doesn't mind a bright room, and if the dominoes wanted to fall, I wouldn't stop them. I'd just make sure they fell in the direction of the people who set them up. A former client of Trevor's left a voicemail on Vega's line, the kind of message that starts with, "You didn't hear this from me." Complaints that never stuck, elders who felt guided more than asked, signatures that arrived by convenience. Ambition tends to keep souvenirs. Older adults haven't lived this long without recognizing a pattern wrapped in a nice suit. The climax came when Vega slid a thin packet across my table. Public records, disciplinary murmurs, near misses. None of it proved our case. All of it explained his confidence. People who skate close to lines don't expect the ice to crack until it does. I tucked the packet under agents and exhaled. We didn't need him to be a villain. We needed him to be exactly what he was, a man who follows the money faster than he follows his conscience. And money in our story was about to change directions very publicly. They started speaking in future tense. When the funds clear, when we're settled, when you're comfortable, their voices got lighter, their jokes got meaner. Jason bragged about navigating the hard stuff. Vanessa previewed paint colors like a lifestyle channel. Older adults have seen this before. Celebration paid for with confetti that hasn't been cut yet. I watched without interrupting and set my face to neutral. The climax was a toast at my dining table, a raised glass to doing the right thing for family. The room applauded an ending that did not exist. I took a polite sip and tasted nothing. Performing gratitude is a skill, so is refusing to let it buy your signature. I cleared the glasses and noted the time. Victory laps are for people who have already won. They were still running toward a finish line I had quietly moved. Confidence can be cruel. It can also be very, very blind. I walked the apartment like you visit a friend before a long trip. Hand on door frames, palm flat on the dining table. A pause at the window. The city moved in its usual way, knowing nothing about my morning. Older viewers will recognize that pre-storm quiet. The air holds its breath, and so do you. I placed folders in a bag, IDs a small notebook, a clean pen. I set out a cup and saucer for tomorrow's tea. Like an anchor, the climax was small but absolute. I said my house's name the way you say a person's thank you, and switched off the lights. Not mourning, not fear. Ceremony. Across town, they were likely making outfits and plans. Here I made readiness. If endings are funerals, for what might have been beginnings are vows. In the dark hall, the clock ticked steady. The truth was already awake, waiting for morning to open the door. The conference room looked like good manners pens, laid out like silverware folders. Aligned a bottle of champagne, resting in a metal cradle that caught the sweat. I arrived early enough to hear the copier finish a job, and the air conditioner sigh little sounds that say, "Everything is ordinary." Ordinary is a costume. It fit the room well. Brandon, calm as ever, nodded to the receptionist. Trevor straightened his tie. Polite greetings slid across the table. Older adults will recognize the ritual signatures, as ceremony witnesses, as chorus the pageantry of being taken care of. I checked my bag ID notebook, the steady pen, then smoothed the edge of the table the way you pet a dog before a storm. The climax came when someone said, "Shall we begin?" and the room leaned forward together. Pens hovering like birds above a lake. I smiled, felt the floor hold my feet, and thought begin. What exactly, their ending or mine, we started. Papers turned, explanations flowed, initials bloomed in small gardens at the bottom of each page. Trevor's laugh was buttered and bright. Brandon's voice was a metronome. I answered like a woman, grateful to be guided a role I had rehearsed until the muscles remembered. Older viewers know the lull of process, the way routine becomes lullaby. The champagne breathed softly in its bucket. Someone made a joke about real estate weather. I watched time without staring, counting in breaths, when the clock felt rude. 17 minutes. That's how long we let the illusion stretch its legs. The climax was invisible, a click in the hallway, a shift in air, the kind of quiet that isn't silence, but anticipation putting on its shoes. I set my pen down as if to rest my hand. 17 minutes is long enough to hang a picture of the future. It's also long enough to choose a new wall. The door opened with a sound I will always be able to spell. Detective Marisol Vega stepped in. First measured unhurried, followed by Special Agent Karen Liu, whose presence made the fluorescent lights feel like daylight. The room recalibrated. Trevor's smile faltered. Brandon took one step back as rehearsed. The bottle stopped being a celebration and became a prop. "Good morning," Vega said, the kind of greeting that arrives with paperwork. Older adults know this pivot, a moment that divides your life into before and after while you're still sitting down. The climax came when Vega's folder unfolded crisp and inevitable, and Agent Lou's voice introduced the purpose of the visit. There is a hush that doesn't ask permission. It lands. I kept my hands folded the way you do in church when something holy or heavy is happening. The world didn't tilt. It clarified. The door settled into its frame, and with it, the story settled into truth. Agent Lou spoke in clear lines. Names charges the language of due process delivered without heat. Someone's chair scraped, someone's pen rolled and bumped a thumb. Small resistance met large reality. Older viewers understand the dignity of procedure when it serves truth. It doesn't shout, it simply stands. Handcuffs made their soft clink a sound less like punishment, and more like consequence saying its name. I watched faces learn what they didn't plan for shock then, argument then the thin air of this must be a mistake. It wasn't. The climax was the quiet that followed the reading of rites. A silence so complete you could hear the cold sweat on the champagne bottle. In that stillness, I felt my pulse slow to a walking pace. A table once used to press me into signing now witnessed a boundary hold. I reached for my notebook, not to write, but to rest my palm on the cover present. Protected, prepared. Detective Vega turned a page and said the sentence I had been waiting for. An irrevocable trust holds this property. The room heard it. I tasted it. Simple words, enormous work. The kind of protection you build when no one is clapping. "Any power of attorney obtained here is without effect," she continued, and I almost smiled. Older adults know that safety when built right doesn't argue, it informs. Trevor blinked. Someone whispered impossible. Brandon stayed perfectly bored his role. The climax came when Vega slid a copy of the trust summary across the table like a final card in a hand that wins quietly. The paper made a small sound against the laminate, a soft proof that this was not theater, it was architecture. I folded my hands and let the facts do what facts do, stand up in daylight. A door that looked open had been locked for weeks. Today, it spoke for itself. The phone began its aftershocks, 1 call to a bank, 1 to a seller, 3 to customer service centers that don't know how to fix a future that was never real. Deposits vanished into non-refundable emails returned, with unfortunately a tow truck angled a shiny hood onto a flatbed with polite efficiency. Older adults have lived long enough to see the domino effect, how choices collect interest, how calendars collect witnesses. The climax came in a cascade, a school enrollment on hold, a decorator's retainer retained a vacation called forfeited, in a sentence that sounded like a sigh. I didn't cheer. Justice isn't a parade. It's a ledger balancing itself. I made tea and stood at the window while the city kept being the city taxis. Pigeons, a cyclist beating the light. Plans can sprint for weeks. Consequences arrive at a walking pace and never lose their breath. The day kept going. So did the unraveling. News travels faster when it's carrying proof. By afternoon, Trevor's name was on paperwork he didn't script, and Dr. Bell's license was a headline he didn't want. Administrative hold further review words that sound like waiting rooms, but function like stop signs. Older viewers know the sober comfort in systems that eventually correct imperfect yes, but stubborn about records. The climax came when Vega texted a single sentence. Ancillaries contained. It meant the spinning parts had been caught. The agent whose optimism outran ethics, the doctor who treated capacity like a formality. I set my phone down and looked around my living room. The lamp, the chair with the good cushion, the photograph of a hand over a newborn fist. Nothing dramatic, just a life that had refused to be repackaged. People who helped push the plan forward were now standing still. That's what circles do when they close. They stop the momentum and hold it to the light. A week later, 2 envelopes arrived in the familiar handwriting of girls who still draw hearts over ICs. Emma wrote about a campus tour and a professor who made ideas feel like places. Chloe wrote about debate finals and the thrill of a well-landed argument. Older adults know the sweetness of mail that smells like library books and victory. Their notes were careful and brave. "We're sorry for what happened. We love you. We want to visit." The climax came in a single line that undid a knot in my chest. "We didn't choose any of that. We choose you." I pressed the paper to my cheek, the way you do when touch has to travel through words. Then I wrote back steady and specific dates for dinner, a promise of brownies, a sentence about boundaries being part of love. Some inheritances are money, some are doors that stay open on purpose. Ours would be both. I'm still here. Same windows, same trees, changing their clothes with the seasons, the same light pooling on the floor at 10 a.m. Peace didn't arrive by accident. I chose it, and I put boundaries around it, like a good frame around a favorite photo. I didn't ruin Jason's life. He made his choices. I simply refused to let those choices take mine with them. That's the difference between punishment and protection. The door stays open for the girls. Emma and Chloe ring the bell. Kick off their shoes and argue over brownies. The other door, the one for adult letters, and demand stays closed. My attorney keeps that key. Healing it, turns out, isn't a grand speech. It's ordinary days that are safely yours. If this story gave you a little backbone for your own boundaries, stay with me. Subscribe and tell me in the comments, what line will you draw to protect your peace? And share this with someone who needs permission to choose theirs.